Today I'm going to present before you two important works that have actually encapsulated not just about pandemics, but there are some very interesting observations which help us to understand our own situation today. When we look at history, we actually are intrigued by the way literature actually was being used in the past. There was absolutely nothing like life in literature. Instead, there was only religion in literature. And the only purpose behind literature was only to give certain amount of enlightenment or education for people about how to behave themselves in the face of life by being religious. So the only component in literature in the earlier days used to be morality. And it was a major tool for people to somehow regulate the lives of the rest of the world, wherein people would only get certain kind of education in the church through sermons. So literature then was limited only to some write-up that had got more to do with how you are supposed to live your life and what you're not supposed to do in life. So it would only be a kind of a list of do's and don'ts, and that was actually literature in the earlier days. Later on, there was something called holy place that was a kind of a shift in literature, and people actually were given certain tasks, and only a few people were given the privilege of jotting down certain things, and all that they had to do was to propagate religion in a better way by talking about religious characters that are part of the Bible. And the holy place actually became part of religion quite slowly. But the major shift that we saw in literature was when Romanticism became quite rampant. People started to use a lot of imagination in literature. But it was not highly democratized then, but somehow whoever was using literature to express themselves, in fact, were using imagination a little too much. So in a way, we are actually looking at one kind of literature that was very much through the minds, and it was never through the experiences. And anything that was created used to be only part of the minds of the people, wherein you would only see extravagant expression of life that you would never have lived. And somehow you would only be mesmerized by the kind of worlds that were projected by the giants of literatures earlier. And you would never identify yourselves inside those worlds, and it would only be for entertainment. And here, the only answer those creators of literatures would give you is art is only meant for art's sake. And here, art was not available for any kind of harsh criticism. And you would only have to appreciate literature there, and you would only have to appreciate the way language was used. So literature, in fact, had to be understood only through the usage of language. So there was this exuberance in the language, there was this verbosity in language, and people, in fact, would understand literature only as some kind of jugglery of words. Other than that, literature, in fact, would serve no other purpose. And now, today, we are living in a world where we ask certain questions like, why do we read? Forget what do we read, but we need to ask ourselves a very important question like, why do we read? So when we ask this kind of a question, why we read, then we need to understand that literature which actually served no intellectual purpose need not be read at all. Because I don't find myself in those literatures, and it has absolutely nothing to serve the purpose of enhancement of my life here. If I read anything, then why should I read? Because today literature, in fact, is being used for the enhancement of our lives, meaning it actually gives you various perspectives to understand your own life. In Kannada, they use a word called kanke for perspectives. Kanke means you understand your life in multiple ways, in multiple ways. And this can be possible only when the writer happens to relate himself to the world that he has lived instead of trying to create something which he has never lived. And we are now looking at a kind of a shift that happened in the creation of literature, and this happened in the 19th century. So if you look back on history, for about centuries, literature in fact was actually limited only to propagating Bible. And only in the recent past that we witnessed literature being used for utilitarian purposes. Otherwise, it had to serve only the egalitarian purpose of just giving people information about religion. So what I mean by utilitarian purpose here is people from the mode of imagination started to drift themselves to the mode of observation. And what is this mode of imagination and what is this mode of observation? When it comes to imagination, you actually have a lot of autonomy to create something because you are not going to be questioned. And uh, criticism, in fact, was never harsh then, and the people, whoever created literatures, would never be attacked by anybody. So they would always have a lot of autonomy and they would create anything that came to their minds, because of which we have several myths even in the Indian scenario. You cannot create characters with multiple hands and multiple heads today, and nobody would read such things. But earlier, people would create such things because they had lots of autonomy, and imagination, in fact, would always be praised. But now we are looking at a major drift in the creation of literatures where people have drifted now towards the use of observation. And what do you observe? What do you observe? This particular movement, especially in literature, actually was called realism. Meaning, when I write something, I should be realistic. And when can I be realistic? Only when I write about my own life. So to an extent, all books will be slightly autobiographical because you write about what you have experienced. Maybe you'll not be part of the story there in the real sense where people are going to really see you there. There won't be much of conspicuous presence of the author. But because he's writing about his own experiences, in a way, all works after 19th century will always be autobiographical because they write about their experiences. So in this world of experiences, we now have a new genre called plague literatures. Plague literatures. And when realism came as part of the literary world, people started to talk about slum dwellers, rural people, bush, bushmen, and anybody, whoever had absolutely no representation in the past, suddenly started to find themselves in the realm of literature. This happened only because literature actually got drifted from being highly imaginative to being very observant. And in this literature, in this realm of literature, we actually were lucky enough to find certain literatures called the subaltern literatures. And people who are 100% subalterns, who had absolutely no representation in the past, in fact started to be represented in literature. And it is such literature that we are talking about today, because earlier, if you really wanted to write about some disease, people would never entertain you and people would never publish you. But today, if you write about diseases, there are people who can publish you, because when you want to really become a writer, you got to understand several things at a time. You cannot become a writer unless there's a publisher, and you cannot write something unless a publisher is convinced. And earlier, people would become convinced only when you wrote something out of imagination. But today, we have actually changed, and the change is so conspicuous that you can write about diseases. And that's why even Kuvempu writes about diseases. Kuvempu writes about anything that is part of humanity. And we call these literatures Jiva Kendrita Sahityagalu, meaning human-centric literatures. Meaning we are living in this world of humanism, meaning they talk more about the human condition, they talk about human lives, they talk about human experiences, and anybody who ever wrote literature wrote what he experienced. And in this particular genre of literatures, we now have something called plague literatures, which spoke largely about human behavior in the face of a crisis that was brought about by a disease called plague. We have witnessed Holocaust, we have witnessed wars, we've seen deaths in masses, but surprisingly, plague actually has killed more than wars. And what is even more surprising for me here is when it comes to understanding regional literatures here in India, we don't have much published, we don't have much written on pandemics or epidemics, except for maybe one or two novels in Kannada. We don't really have anything that is actually written on diseases. Because anybody, whoever wants to know more about Kannada literature today in relation to the representation of diseases, we have only Gruhabanga by S.L. Bhairappa. And to an extent, we have Samskara, which makes only a vague reference to a plague, which actually becomes part of the novel only towards the end, because there's too much emphasis only on certain caste issues in Samskara. But when it comes to the reference made to plague there, you can understand plague quite differently there in Samskara, but there's nothing like plague being the central character in Samskara. And even when it is Gruhabanga, though he speaks largely about the disease, he doesn't put more stress on plague. Instead, there's too much of representation of poverty there in Gruhabanga. So poverty becomes more menacing for the characters than plague. So we don't really have authentic representation of a plague in India like it is in European literatures. Uh, how do they actually represent the pandemics? Quite surprisingly, they not only are very realistic in giving us authentic information about how the pandemics consumed almost the entire cities there, they also make subtle observation about the human behavior in the face of such crisis. I'm now talking about novels which were written almost 100 years ago. But surprisingly, whatever that was written almost 100 years ago actually is true even today. That's why these books are classics. And a classic is the one which actually retells our own stories, right? And a classic is the one which actually tells us our own stories. And the moment I read any book, when I find myself there in the book, then I find that to be a classic. And when it is Albert Camus or when it is any other person who is talking about life, they speak about life with such authenticity that you immediately identify yourself with those words. And the characters actually become almost part of your own persona. Such is the kind of representation of reality that you normally see in the literatures that were produced, especially after the 19th century. And what is intriguing for me here is the pattern of human behavior has not changed even slightly, because however people behaved when plague uh, captured their lives is almost quite similar to how we are behaving today. Once this corona actually spread here in India, and once we had this outbreak of the disease, we had almost the same kind of behavior being exhibited by the entire nation, which actually was represented by Albert Camus almost 100 years back. 70, 75 years back. It all starts with panic. It all starts with panic and panic buying, panic hoarding, and too much of self-absorption and experience of imprisonment. And people actually started to talk about certain new words which became part of their vocabulary of late. Like people had never heard of words like quarantine or lockdown, and these actually became part of our vocabulary only in the recent past. But it's only the case with the Indians. But when it is the Europeans, they in fact had heard of these words for 100 years. They are not very new for them. But surprisingly, even though the words are quite familiar to the Europeans, the behavior has not changed. The pattern is just the same. And what is very intriguing for these writers is when there is some kind of an enlightenment that is created by one or two doctors, especially about the outbreak of a disease, we normally suspect them. And there's also a certain amount of complacency in us that nothing will happen to us. And even now, when it is this corona and when there is so much being said to us about social distance and the mask that we got to wear and washing our hands pretty frequently, we tend to ignore these suggestions because we believe in certain kind of superstition that we all have herd immunity. And the same thing actually holds good in the behavior of the people almost 70, 80 years back. I'll start with a small book by Jack London that was written in 1912. It's called Scarlet Plague. I'm not going to tell you this, I mean, I'm not going to be elaborate about the novel, but maybe a slight reference to it. Scarlet Plague is a very deadly disease, you know, and people would actually die painful death, and your body would become red, and uh, you would die a painful death. What is horrible about these pandemics is you cannot help people in these circumstances. Supposing there is a neighbor who has contracted corona, I cannot go to him and lend him my helping hand. But if the same person has met with an accident, I can certainly go and do some favor. But one of the worst things about this pandemic is we cannot help people. Instead, we got to keep ourselves at a distance and only send them a silent prayer through WhatsApp. Even sending human help has to happen virtually. It cannot happen physically. You cannot go out and help people. And that's exactly because, that's exactly why we all are self-absorbed in the face of pandemics. And Jack London speaks about this beautifully. We read these people of outside because they have this tremendous ability of not just narrating a story, but in the meanwhile, they point at certain human behavioral pattern beautifully. One thing I'll tell you in the course of this narration of the story is about his observation of human behavior so beautifully. Okay, it begins with a class by an English professor, and suddenly a student of his happens to collapse, and it's not normal for a healthy girl to simply collapse. There's nothing wrong with her when she entered the classroom, and now there is something wrong suddenly because her body starts turning red. And this guy is a professor, and he knows something about all these diseases, and he wouldn't want to find this to be something that has got to do with maybe the BP or some kind of a tiredness or anything. He wouldn't want to ignore this because the body is turning red. And he breaks the news to his family members as well, that I happen to see a girl almost dying right in front of me because of scarlet plague, because her body turned red. The family members are now panic stricken. Were you with her for a long time? Meaning, I was not with her for a long time. It was a regular class, but she happened to die in the class. Then why did you come in? Because when you were with somebody who contracted a deadly disease, why did you come in? You have now made us vulnerable to contracting this disease. And he is taken aback. He is stunned by the responses of his own people. And then suddenly there is another change in the people's behavior. They start scampering away from the disease. And here he says, where will you run away? Because death is ubiquitous, he says. You have death actually occupying your world, and wherever you go, you have got only death in store. And where will you go? And another observation here is, there are two kinds of people observed by the writer. One is the poor and the other one is the rich. The rich will somehow manage to get themselves some shelter in their farmhouses, but the poor actually remain poor in the face of this pandemic, and they leave their fate to the hands of God. So the only solace they get is only in the form of certain superstition that they believe in. Otherwise, they cannot afford a better place. They cannot afford transport system. They cannot afford treatment. Instead, they got to only have some faith in some superstition, which appears to give them some solace, because the world has actually abandoned them. And this guy, after this first half of the novel, later, He happens to again come back to San Francisco, which actually had become completely depopulated because of scarlet plague, and now the plague has gone away and the people are pretty happy. And he wants to narrate the story to his people about how scarlet plague had occupied humanity in San Francisco. Surprisingly, people don't believe his story. What is this? It's plague. Okay, what about plague? It killed people. Come on. We are now living in the world of technology, and science has progressed so much, and you're talking about some stupid disease which consumed people, and you're lying, old man, they say. And the same thing we did when there was this outbreak of corona. The first response of all of us was, it is happening in China. Let's not worry. And even Trump said it's a Chinese virus, and Chinese will deal with it. And Italians said, we have this policy of hug a Chinese a day and we'll hug them. And they had actually lots of businesses with Chinese, and they continued their businesses with the Chinese people without worrying too much about contracting corona. And there were deaths there in Italy too, because we don't normally believe in anything that is bitter. Kahi satyagalu. And we want to somehow keep ourselves at a safe distance when somebody wants to talk about bitter things. It's like if we go to a hospital for a regular checkup, we advise regular checkup to others, but when it comes to doing it for ourselves, there's slight hesitation in us, because if the doctor tells us something bitter, we would never be in a position to digest it, because it's about health, and it's about maybe death, who knows, or it's about some kind of a disease which is already in us which we don't know of, and we don't really want to listen to such bitter truths. And the same thing happened even to the Chinese themselves in Wuhan. Maybe a scientist actually had warned the government officials about the outbreak of a disease, and all that they wanted was to hush up the matter, because there is only this panic in the government officials to somehow maintain the status quo. Because if people get to know about the disease and the outbreak of the disease, that would only hamper their businesses. And in case there's nobody coming inside China, and if Chinese people are barred from entering other countries, then China would definitely suffer huge economic loss. So they wanted to somehow keep the matter about corona hushed up for a long time. And this is exactly how the government officials behave, even in the other novel which I'm going to talk about, that is The Plague by Albert Camus. Nobody supports the doctors there in the city of Oran, in which there is this outbreak of the plague, written by Albert Camus. Because all these government officials need is the maintenance of the status quo. Let's not worry about it. And another funny thing in that particular book is, they can't be the deaths of rats because of some disease. They don't get enough food, so they die, is what they say. If you find rats dying there, and if you find the dead rats on roads, it could be only because of lack of food. Let's not worry about it. And this kind of indifferent behavior by the government officials is what actually hampers the lives of the people, and nobody would know about it. And the media actually would never know about such things. Instead, the behavior of the media has not changed either. Even in Jack London's work, the media is worried only about reporting to people about the number of deaths that have happened. And today also, if you just watch any channel, they first begin with giving you statistics. It's almost like Tendulkar's statistics: number of one days played and number of runs scored. Same thing, number of deaths, number of cases. And only in the recent past that the media has started to talk about the number of recoveries as well. Otherwise, they would only talk about the number of cases, and it would only create more panic in us. But why would the media do that? The media's behavior has not changed since the beginning, because the media has always wanted some kind of a sensation. Even if it is a matter like pandemic, they would want to sensationalize the information. They want to sensationalize any news that they get, because it's all about writing a story. And they would want to create stories about the pandemic in a very sensational manner, where people would become not only interested, but they would read. I'll give you one more example. ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಅವಳು ರಾಗಿಣಿ ಅಂತ ಒಬ್ಳು ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಕೊಂಡ್ಲಲ್ಲ. A friend of mine sent me a WhatsApp post, which is a screenshot taken from a news channel. And the caption says, Ragini, ಮೊದಲ ರಾತ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಗಿಣಿ ಪರದಾಟ ಅಂತ. And this is the caption of a news channel. They are talking about an actress who has been arrested because of her involvement in the drug racket, and she has now been in the police station, and she has had several difficulties in handling herself inside the police station, and that has been reported by the channel in this kind of a language. It's not that they are poor at the language. They have used this language very consciously only to give us some kind of a thrill. And after this post was circulated, there was one more post by from my journalism friend who which said, Vande Sireyalli Ragini Dinavella. So all these guys in fact are so worried about Ragini's sexuality instead of Ragini's involvement in the drug racket. And you can only see certain kind of a subtle shift in the matter that is being discussed, because the media is only trying to draw our attention to Ragini's sexuality instead of talking about who are the others who are involved in this drug racket, and what would be the condition of the youth here in Bangalore in case their heroes are involved in drug racket. And nobody is bothered to give us such information, and exactly this happens to be represented by Jack London as well, about how the media behaved when there was this spread of scarlet plague. And when I mentioned about this holding, very interesting thing about this holding is you all must have experienced it. The 4 or 5 cautions given by all doctors was you have to keep washing your hands and you have to use sanitizers. There was this panic buying of sanitizers almost all across India, and even if you want to pay almost the double of the amount, you would not get the sanitizers maybe some 3-4 months back. And you would never get masks, because all masks in fact had actually been bought by the panic buyers. And a friend of mine who works in a premier university in Mysore happens to be another kind of a buyer. He bought whiskey worth 40,000 rupees. And I was stunned by it, because this hoarding actually becomes part of our behavior precisely because of this lockdown. And once we get to hear that there would be lockdown because of the outbreak of the disease, people would understand that their regular habits would be curbed. And what is your regular habit? You would want to go out for your regular work, and you would want to travel, and you would want to do many things that you have been doing for years, and suddenly those things actually become arrested. And when you are house arrested, your behavior surprisingly will be different, because you have a wife, you have children, all right, and you have a home, and you got to spend your time with them without going out for about 3 or 4 weeks. That's it. This is a simple task the government gave us. But suddenly this lockdown became so bitter for many people in India that there was this abuse of children as well, because of the onset of frustration in people. So what is this regular behavior? I would want to have a drink maybe in the evening. And if I go out, there will be policemen with lathis patrolling my roads, so I cannot go out. And I don't really have some stock at home, and I cannot ask for loan of some drink from people because I cannot meet anybody. So this is a very strange situation I am put in, and I cannot do anything about my regular habits. So what happens is your frustration will increase, and it has to be ventilated. What do the people do? Either they'll beat up their wives or their children. And this was one very interesting observation made then as well, because the people actually found lockdown to be horrible. And another interesting philosophical observation made by these writers is people suddenly started to love their past, and people suddenly started to aspire for the return of their past lives, because they realized the value of their actual life only when they were denied their lives for about 3 weeks or so in the lockdown period. When they were denied their life for about just 3 weeks during the lockdown period, people became so worried about the loss of their regular life that they started to send silent prayers to God for the return of their regular life. And there were interesting WhatsApp posts as well. A friend of mine sent a very interesting post that said this was way back in 2019 when people would eat in restaurants. And that was one interesting post, because people have now started to doubt if it would be possible at all to really dine in restaurants today. And we also wonder if there was really a day when we would all actually travel together in buses. And is it really true that we would see crowded buses in Bangalore where people would actually hang even on the doors? And a bus that would carry maybe some 40, 50 people would always carry more than 80 people at a time. And there was this day when people would fight for their space inside the buses. But today, the buses are empty. And how is the regular life happening then? And every now and then we would hear the noises of the ambulances, but today we don't really have such noises of the ambulances. And how come the people have not died in large number? So there's something to do with our regular life, and this lockdown and this corona and this pandemic has actually given us a new version of life, and this new normal has opened up different kind of a perspective about our own life. And here, if we move on to this novel by Camus, The Plague, it's a doctor called Dr. Ryu who happens to see the dead rats, and he alerts the people there are dead rats around. So the simple responses are, so what? So what? It's the rat that is dying, and it may have died because of hunger. And the doctor wants to somehow rationalize the issue. When you are talking to the mass, rationale will not work. That's the problem. If a politician makes a huge speech, people will listen. But when a doctor wants to talk to them, they would not want to listen. And this doctor wants to make some sense to the people, and he is actually telling them something quite serious about the deaths of rats. He knows about the deaths of rats, and the people tend to ignore him. And they tend to ignore him so badly that he's even made fun of. And suddenly, there's also another observation made by Camus. Religion starts occupying the space of science, because we are now living in the 21st century, and we normally talk science, and we don't believe in anything that has no evidence, and we are very empirical in our understanding of life. In these circumstances, suddenly, one development that Camus actually saw in his time was religion started to occupy the space of science. A church pope starts telling the people, it's all because of our sins. It's all because of our sins. And the only way we can somehow manage to escape this plague is let us become religious. But Dr. Ryu has a different issue here to encounter. Being religious or being irreligious is not the solution here. We need to do something about alerting the people, and we have to somehow get the people relocated to different places. And getting people relocated to different places is not going to be done by just one doctor. One solitary person is not enough to convince one entire city to relocate themselves to different places, because the people would become suddenly sentimental about having to leave their places and go to some different place. Because if they come back after this lockdown period is over, they are not sure if they would find their places to be available for their regular use. The media starts doing something here. They start kind of publishing information about the deaths of the rats, and then the city officials will become alert about cremating the rats. So that is one first step taken by the government officials, which is a kind of a solace to Dr. Ryu. But beautiful philosophy here is Dr. Ryu could have definitely been self-centered. And the moment he got to know about the outbreak of this plague, he could definitely have gone to some safer place. He did not do it. Instead, he wanted to somehow be of some use for the people, and he continues to do this work even though there is not much of cooperation from either the city officials or even his own friends. And this is one wonderful philosophy of existentialism. The world, of course, or the life, of course, is essentially meaningless. It is absurd. You cannot make meanings out of anything using your rationale, because the world, in fact, is beyond your human language. Your human language cannot capture the meaning of the life that you are living. In the meanwhile, logic has absolutely no value in the face of life. And we are condemned here to live. It's not that it's Eden that we are privileged with, and it's not that God created this Eden for our bliss, and it's not that we are living a happy life. We are condemned to be here, and what is very true is only suffering. And this is actually the essential trait of existentialism. But what is important for us is the next part of the philosophy. Fine, life is essentially painful, sufferance is very true, but what next? In the face of this meaninglessness, in the face of this absurdity, what is important for us is to continue to live. It's not that you would want to lose hope, because being hopeful is also against existentialism. Existentialism doesn't talk about hope. It says you got to simply keep doing your work, and it's called tenacity, right? And Camus has a very interesting mythological story to narrate for us. It's not part of this particular work, but his other work called The Myth of Sisyphus tells us a very simple story. It's about a character called Sisyphus who is condemned to roll up a huge boulder to the top of a mountain. But the problem of this particular task is the boulder would always roll down. Every time he takes it to the top of the mountain, it would only roll down. And he has to keep doing this particular work forever. And this metaphor actually demonstrates our life as well. There's no such explainable meaning about anything that we live, or there's no such explainable meaning about anything that we do, but we keep doing it. Same way, Sisyphus keeps doing this particular work even though he knows that the boulder would roll down. And Camus says this is called tenacity. Because all of us would become suicidal when we understand that the world, in fact, is captured by corona. When the world is captured by COVID-19, which appears to have absolutely no vaccination, and no doctor has so far come up with any vaccine, and no nation appears to have come up with one break at least, even though Putin actually made an announcement that his own daughter has been administered with the vaccine. We cannot completely trust it. And we all become completely suicidal, and that is natural. But what is important from literatures here, about literatures here, is it not only tells us a story. Here, when it is the plague, you have people who are worried about their places which they have abandoned and come to different places. And they are also scared about seeing the corpses being wrapped up in mats and being cremated in masses. And unfortunately, these stories are prevalent even in Indian circumstances as well. ನಿನ್ನನ್ನು ಚಾಪೆ ಸುತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಶಾಪ ಇದೆ, if you understand. And this is something which has actually been derived from the situation of plague. May you be affected with plague is the actual meaning of that curse. And earlier, when it was plague here in India, the people would not only move out of their villages, but they would also be deprived of a chance for proper funeral of their loved ones. And this is the worst thing about the pandemics. You can't even go and see your loved one in case he or she happens to die in the hospital because of the disease. And you will not be even given the body. And this might even lead to some kind of corruption from the side of the doctors as well. They might want to use the body parts and you might become suspicious about them as well. But the government cannot do anything about this because it's the pandemic. It's a deadly disease that we are dealing with, so your rationale will not work. So in the face of all these difficulties, how do I manage my life? The only solution all these writers do give us is, when it is a pandemic, when it is an epidemic, when it is a disease which seems to consume almost the entire city, we need to somehow keep ourselves resolute enough to continue to live. And this tendency is called the tendency of tenacity. And this is exactly why we need to read. Because when Ryu is doing his work so sincerely, he happens to lose his own wife. She dies because of plague. And of course, there is this momentary lapse of commitment to his work because he is grief stricken. But he manages to recompose himself to continue to do his work. And this is exactly why these works actually become classics for us. A work becomes a classic because of the characters that are generated by these writers. You will never forget these characters. And the characters don't carry with them some unique features, but they keep retelling our stories. And Dr. Ryu becomes one major metaphor of tenacity for us. And his work, even at the cost of his own wife's life, is not only laudable, but it is unexampled. And here, Albert Camus, though appears to be sounding quite pessimistic in his narration of the story, because when you are reading plague literature, there's nothing like entertainment. And there's nothing like happiness. Even when you read Bhairappa's Gruhabanga, you become sad. You become sad. And it was serialized by Vaishali Kasravalli, and it's available on YouTube. You may watch it. Every episode has a kind of a balance of some kind of humor and in the meanwhile, some kind of terror. And when the central character of the work happens to die, the woman, you become very sad about it because she suffers not only poverty, she also happens to suffer the menace of the disease. In the face of all these problems, what matters to us here is, like I said, tenacity. And Dr. Ryu or even James Smith of The Scarlet Plague, both these characters come before us with the component of tenacity. And this is exactly why these literatures do matter to us. That's it.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Would anybody like to continue with the discussion?
Sridhar sir, namaskara.
You have to unmute yourself, sir. Sridhar sir.
Sir, unmute ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ.
Yeah. So how are you? Fine. It was nice listening to you.
Oh.
Bringing a wide range of texts and experiences.
ಸರ್ ಒಂದು ಈ ಫೋರಮ್ಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧ ಇಲ್ದಲೇ ಇರೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು.
ಗೊತ್ತು ನಂಗೆ ಅದೇನ್ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಅಂತ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳೋರು ಅದನ್ನ ಕಡೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ.
ಆಯ್ತು ಸರ್, ಆಯ್ತು. Did I make sense, sir?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as you were saying, the pandemic is a very unusual situation. It's not a normal situation.
Exactly.
So it evokes typical responses across time. But still, I was wondering if, because the age of plague, Camus plague,
sir.
the World War time, that is the background. But today we have what is called the neoliberal stage. So would you still say that the human behavior remains the same across centuries? Because a lot of things have happened politically, economically.
Yeah.
Because it's possible that we can hold on to the position saying that human behavior ultimately is basically the same.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they are equally subjected to things that are happening around. So I don't know, because I haven't studied that in that way, but I wanted to ask whether the way the disease was responded to by the state, has there been, is there a difference there? Not the people's reaction, because they are the victim, but the way it was responded to by the state.
Yeah.
Is there a difference? Do you see a difference?
So I mentioned about the obsession of these politicians to maintain the status quo, which actually has been mentioned by Albert Camus and even Jack London in his work Scarlet Plague. I'll give you a simple example about how our own education minister is behaving today. We actually have this major problem of having to conduct the exams without problems, but unfortunately things in fact are not within our control. And when you have a large number of people coming in for their examination, you cannot really be assured of 100% protection. But there is this force on all of us to conduct the exams. And understand this, why is it that the government in fact had to go ahead with these exams like NEET and CET? Because the pressure that is actually mounting on these politicians from the side of all these managements is pretty understandable. They want to project before the world that the world has not changed and this new normal in fact need not be worried, and let's go ahead with the exams. And it's not that they would want to give us a normal world back, just that they would want to be assured of the millions of rupees that would be missed in case there are no exams now. So that is very intriguing. And this education minister has sent orders to all of us that the offline classes have got to get started from October. Come on. How can you really think about offline classes? Because you're talking about PG students, fine. How about the children who go to schools? They would even extend masks, who knows? They would borrow masks and they would fight for masks, and who knows how they behave, because it's a kind of a new situation that they are in. And if they have to sit at a distance from their closest friends inside the schools, that would also be pretty painful for them. But the government has got this tendency to somehow project the world to be completely normal. So this status quo thing. And another behavioral pattern which remains quite similar to the people of Albert Camus' world is we all actually did this hoarding thing and panic buying, and all these things were very much there, and still they are there, because in the face of crisis brought about by calamities like these, what matters to all of us is food. And there was this large amount of immigration of about close to 17 crores of workers. And what an unbelievable irony it is, because they were homeless though being Indians. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಹೋಗಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ವಿ. So because we all are self-absorbed, we could rather have somehow done something, and there was nothing like planning. All that mattered to all of us is just this panic, and we were all self-absorbed, and It's almost like when there is a fire in our house, except the mind, the rest of the body will be working. Same thing happened to the entire nation. Nobody thought anything. People only acted, and that led to more catastrophe. Anta Nandu Bhavani.
That's right, because you can see that there are many similar patterns
Yeah, yeah.
that we see, like as you said. So the initial stage is in a self-denial mode. From there, one jumps to the other extreme of extreme panic.
Very
And
true.
then the third element is to take the panic, at least to convince ourselves that the panic is normal or
Yeah.
normalized. So that's how the life has to go on.
Yeah, life has
Maybe,
to go
yeah,
on.
yeah. No, it's important to assert certain universal factors because we should not be carried away completely by this postmodern denial of the universal.
Yeah.
There are universals, of course. Human life has. That's why all great narratives have talked about these universals, which became so jaded that somebody had to pull it up, which was done. But we have to, therefore, once again revisit those universals.
Perfect. Yeah.
I think maybe the pandemic reminds us about the fundamental human condition.
Mm.
That way, I agree with you. I think it's a good analysis. That's how
Great.
I think we can respond. Maybe others will say something. We're all there.
Yes, the others. Do you have anything to add on to this? Right, Shiv sir, thank you so much. Yes, it is important for us to understand that. So, why are you smiling?
ಏನಿಲ್ಲ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ
Right.
ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ.
Oh, okay. I think so.
Yeah.
It is important for us to understand that there is somewhere this a kind of strength lies in literature, which somewhere or the other tries to illuminate us. I'm using specific words deliberately. It try to illuminate us based on these psychological stages. Of course, as Sridhar sir said, the first thing is that denial mode. And it's always in the belated recognition of such a pandemic situation is when we try to understand, yes, it is a shared grief, it is a shared struggle. Though our attempts are to come across as a collective action, it never really comes across like that because we are, of course, what do you say, we are, if I may use the word, confined also in a way due to certain hierarchical structures. How do you think literature otherwise plays any role, if at all, in trying to somewhere or the other recognize these hierarchical structures and break them down and move forward, or counter them and move forward?
ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ನೀನು ಈ 20ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ಓದ್ತಿದ್ರೆ ಬೇಸಿಕಲಿ ಈ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಹೇಳೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ the very purpose of the literatures, especially that were produced in the latter half of the 19th century and the 20th century, is to simply break the hierarchies, and the question of hierarchy never arises there. And meaning there's nothing like being confined within the trap of your tradition. Meaning, of course, if you really want to go ahead and move forward, you need to have certain amount of knowledge of your past, and your history matters. All such things are fine. But the literatures of today actually don't really have hesitation about deconstructing anything. They reinvent meanings for almost every damn thing. So such being the case, we don't really have to think about being confined in the trap of tradition and the hesitation caused by the structures of hierarchy. All such things don't matter at all, because these literatures are meant for such re-evaluation, reinvention, presentation of the world.
No, my still the question is that how can one, a layman at least, recognize the, if I may use the word, recognize the politics played by certain authorities, if you may say so. Now, as a layman, I need to recognize this and then further, structure my actions so that even I am at a safe distance and so are the people who surround me. This never really happens quickly. It's only after a period of time that it happens. Those of us who are acquainted with literature, those who read literature.
So when you are talking about the layman,
Yeah.
ಈ ಪಾದರಾಯನಪುರ ಕಾಂಟ್ರವರ್ಸಿ ನೆನಪಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಅಲ್ಲಿನ ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟರ್ಗೆ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಬಂತು. ಓಕೆ, and he was being admitted to a hospital, and the doctors and almost a team of doctors had come there in an ambulance to pick him. Your worry here is how can the people understand the politics that are played behind their backs by these authorities? And here is one official who happens to be the elected representative of these people, who is being given a king's favor by all these people who don't seem to understand the actual nuances of this disease, and they have all gathered there in large number without worrying about the social distance. And the layman actually is still in the trap of the politics. And literature, even though hints at such things, we have not learned much lesson. ಇದು ಗೊಗೋಲ್ ಕಾಲದಿಂದನೂ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇದೆ. ತೇಜಸ್ವಿ ಅವರ ತಬರನ ಕಥೆನಲ್ಲೂ ಇದೆ. ನೀನ್ 108 hints ಅಂದ್ರೆ all these realistic literatures have done their best to somehow alert us about the politics and the bureaucrats and how we actually have been trapped within the web of bureaucracy. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾಫ್ಕಾ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, it's not that God is unseen. What is unseen is bureaucracy, right? So 100 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, 100 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದನೂ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. But just that things don't happen to get into the minds of people because you are talking about mass. ಇದು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಸೀಸರ್ನ ಯಾಕೆ ಕೊಂದ್ರಿ, ಅವನು ಡಿಕ್ಟೇಟೋರಿಯಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಿಹೇವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದ, ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ನೀನೇ ಸೀಸರ್ ಆಗು ಅಂತ ಬ್ರೂಟಸ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. We eliminated Caesar because he was proving to be a threat to Rome, and I loved Caesar all right, but I loved Rome more. Fine. And he's trying to tell the people that we need to have republicanism here and not Caesarism. But the people don't seem to understand what Brutus was trying to tell them. They say, okay, fine, if Caesar is dead, you become Caesar. So ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ, ಅರ್ಥವಾಗಲ್ಲ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ. ಇದು ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಸುಹಾಸಿನಿ, ಓದಿದ್ರೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುವಂತದ್ದಲ್ಲ ಇದು. It's a jugglery of your mind, ಒಂದು ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಗೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ರೈಟರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಕಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾನೋ ಅದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ನಾವು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಕಷ್ಟಪಡ್ಬೇಕು, right? Because these are readerly texts. If you are talking about the writerly texts, they would contain only one meaning. But these readerly texts contain multiple meanings, and whatever has been written has got to be understood with total commitment. And you cannot expect a layman to have such commitment to understand literatures. Literature serves its purpose only for a limited few. It cannot reach common man.
There are two things here. One is, may I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So one is, see, earlier, one of the important features of modernity is that it started questioning the very order itself. It can be from enlightenment, it can be from the divine, whatever sources. So once you start questioning the order, the whole attempt was to explore how the disorder is functioning in society, how it affects various things in human life, like relations with others, relation with nature, relation with oneself, etc. So that's why we see that this is the common stuff of modernity in a very general sense. But if we go back to pre-modern literatures, the tendency there was to, at least there was a belief in the order, that there is some kind of safety in the order, and the order matters to life. So it was given. So every Shakespearean tragedy, for example, ends with the suggestion that some kind of order is restored. Okay, that order, of course, the greatness of Shakespeare is that the play also questions that order, but finally it tries to end with some sense of order. So you can see that all pre-modern classics have this sense of order. They may not show it explicitly, but there is a tacit belief that yes, society has to get back to this order, and getting back to this order is all that that the novel tries to suggest. Either we are trying to get it or not getting it is a different story. But now we have also moved away from that, because we have not only explored the disorder and how it affects our lives, we are trying to look at how the secular forces, not the divine, the secular forces like politics or other economic conditions, structures, poverty, untouchability, etc., like caste, class, etc., itself has, that order itself has created this chaos, and therefore why it is important to question it. So that is why those who are looking for some kind of a solace, they don't get it in modern literature, as he was pointing it out. So you have to explore and see why modern literatures always disturb you a lot, because that disturbance is a way of there is a pedagogical function to that disturbance. It tries to tell you, okay, now I may not be able to give you an answer, but if you, when you read this, it may at least set you to think about what can be done about this. So it's a very big question. And it is not the text, physical text, which is readerly. Even the life itself, the second point is, life itself has now become so readerly that it has led to a lot of chaos. Sometimes, for example, Hindu conducted a survey among all the uh, workers who were returning. They were on their way back. They had traveled a long distance with great misery, physical discomfiture, and no hope. So they were given a set of questions, and surprisingly, majority. So they said, "Has the pandemic made you suffer a lot?" Yes. What do you think about the present government? They said it's functioning well. So they got more than 50% endorsed the way government was functioning. The same number of people said that their life was in misery and they suffered a lot. Now, how do you explain this? This is a very great paradox. So does it mean that the people don't know, or they are saying something that we don't know, that we are not able to interpret? So these are the, because otherwise it looks like an apparent contradiction. Because on the one hand, they know that they have suffered because of this, and for us, it's obvious that the government could have done a lot more to see to it that this situation did not arise, that they could have planned something for these unorganized laborers before the lockdown was announced, or even after the lockdown was announced. There was some time for them to create a package, which they did not do. They just left them to fend for themselves. But still, the people believe that the government has done something great. So this is the kind of unanswerable questions that even literature is throwing upon us today, because life itself is throwing such questions. I just wanted to share this. I'm not. You cannot even formulate this in theoretical terms, because it's full of chaos. Because the theory tries to establish an order again. So, but these are beyond theories. But these are the kind of questions paradoxical questions that we confront not just in today's literature, but also in the kind of life that we see around. The only thing literature can do, and which it has been doing for ages, is to sensitize us to this kind of problems, questions,
Yeah.
or what is called dead ends, aporias. That these dead ends appear like dead ends because we have constructed them in a particular way. So that needs a bit of sensitivity to understand it. So the pandemic situation, in a way, throws up a lot of questions, not just those questions raised by some selected texts that deal with the pandemic directly, like Gruhabanga, Camus, Plague, or Jack London's The Scarlet Fever, or a few more. There are a lot of films also. I just forgot I watched a film that they
Contagion.
talks about this, not talks, but shows how the doctor's warning goes a waste and then there is chaos about the plague. But plague has a larger metaphor of creating a sense of the normal while things are not really so normal is itself a big metaphor of our times. That's what I would like to look at it, because we think, for example, when you say free market, we assume that it's free. Actually, free market is not free. It's always controlled, conditioned, and made to serve only a select people and not large majority.
Very true.
So, like that, the semblance of the order, the semblance of the normalcy is now disturbed by this pandemic. So it should raise a lot of questions. So maybe we should wait and see that without any reference directly to the disease as such, the stories and the novels or films, even popular art that may emerge in the future, might try to capture this paradox of behaving as if things are normal when things are not really normal. Okay, just wanted to share it.
And to add to your question, Suhasini,
Yes, sir.
ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಓದೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಸಣ್ಣ ತಾಕತ್ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಒಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. There was one video that actually had become viral on WhatsApp, which I also sent to several people just yesterday. It's a video that involves a woman. It's a video which involves a woman who is abused by a stranger in public, and he would have used some unparliamentary word on her, meaning fuck you, he would have said. And the video shows that the woman strips herself off and he offers herself to the young man so that he can do what he actually said that he would do. And he runs away. I sent this video to several people hoping that they would love the video. A friend of mine who also is an English professor sent me a reply. Kala kettoido sir. So that was a big flop show for me, because here is one woman who actually has intimidated a man through her nudity, and you can definitely theorize this video so beautifully and also make this part of your gender studies class. Instead, you got trapped in your traditional understanding of morality of a woman. And you would want to again understand this gesture of this woman through the lens of morality, instead of understanding this through the lens of a certain amount of woman empowerment. And why can't you theorize that in psychological terms? Why can't you look at it in modern terms? This is where things actually become problematized by literature. ಅದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು ತಪ್ಪು ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಉಂಟು, ಅದರದ್ದು ಪರ್ಪಸ್ ಸರ್ವ್ ಆಗದಲ್ಲೇ ಇರೋದು ಉಂಟು.
Quite interestingly, I was reading After Amnesia by G.N. Davy. In the beginning, I think in the first chapter, Tradition and Amnesia, that's where he also talks about defining tradition and saying that often its translation is parampara here. But then he eventually breaks it up and says tradition is different and parampara here, as we see, as we try to define parampara here, is entirely different. Though they are used interchangeably, there's a lot of, it's completely, what do you say, opposite. And
I think we lost you for a while. We lost you for a while. Or ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ?
okay, I was just reading this particular book, After Amnesia. He uses these two words, tradition and parampara.
Ah.
Right? And he says that now we have been using this interchangeably because it has come to mean the same as what he says, but eventually he breaks it down. He says both tradition is entirely different, that is passed on from the predecessors to the next generation, but here parampara is entirely different.
Okay.
If you actually decode the word, go back to its etymology, parampara in a way tries to outcast certain things.
Yeah.
Of course, I know the context is different, but the confusion that gets created within this entire, what do you say, the circumference of trying to read literature, trying to interpret it in one manner or the other, maybe remains a, what do you say, common cause.
Yeah.
I have a question here, so asked by one of my students.
And the major challenge for us here is to
Yes, sir.
understand literature by transcending the cultural barriers. That is where things become difficult. Yeah.
True. I have a question here. He asks, does literature hold record of protests, demonstration happening simultaneously with the pandemic spread against socio-political viruses? Shibradeep, would you like to elaborate on your question?
What I meant was during the pandemic and during the entire course of these, now we are in unlock 4.0, and so I have come across so many news headlines about protests, and as a student I have been following the student body protest happening in Thailand, and even the protests which are happening in US, and even in our own country we have seen that when pandemic was just in China, simultaneously we were seeing protests against certain very for me unreasonable policies, I hold them, that were happening in our country by the student body again. So does literature hold record that these certain viruses which are always present around us, but they come out blatantly one fine day, and there's such a violent protests happening, and then simultaneously we have this flow in of a pandemic inside our country, and it's a complete chaos. One side you're having policies which are violent, which are to a large extent inhumane, and the other side you have a naturally occurring entity, and it's like it's happening simultaneously. So does literature hold such record, like the plague literature specifically holds record where people go completely inhumane against their own kind, and then you have protests, you have demonstrations, and
by the literatures, but very interestingly, Camus' book speaks about the sense of protest that can be witnessed in the character Dr. Ryu. There are no placards held, but he wants to somehow take the initiative himself, wherein he tries to alert the common people to go out of their city to save themselves. So this is only one such a subtle hint of a protest that is initiated by or triggered by Dr. Ryu, but not really in the sense of holding placards or anything. And another thing which you actually used in your question is very interesting, the social viruses, that may actually become part of the literatures in the future, because today I'll give you a simple example about how the COVID cases are being registered. health official actually committed suicide here in Karnataka very recently.
Yeah.
Because he was being pressurized by his seniors to give proper targets. And try to understand this, how can he really meet targets when it is a disease? So you expect people to have contracted this disease on a regular basis so that he can meet some target. And if you don't meet the target, you will have to create the target, because the central government has released huge amount of money as COVID money. And if you seal down a particular house, for the barricades that you put and the kind of boards that you hang there, you will be given an amount of 7,000 rupees. So if you do that almost on a regular basis, you can definitely make hell a lot of money. And this has got to be distributed among several people. And that's exactly why they become obsessed with targets. And these are social viruses which actually have to be represented by literatures in the future. And it takes hell a lot of guts for somebody to represent this. But social viruses, of course, are more menacing because they create panic. And the same thing, in fact, actually happened in the literatures created by Albert Camus as well. When there is not much of cooperation from the political authorities, it, of course, is nothing but creating panic among the people. Because if rats are dying and when the doctors are worried, and if the political authorities...
We too lost you for a while. Right?
So, yeah. If you think there is no problem there, even though the doctors are alerting you, then it is really a social virus, right? So a social virus in the form of this politician appears to be more menacing than this invisible virus. But like you asked, the record of the representation of social virus is not very blatant in the literatures of the past. It's very subtle. Okay, but that has to happen now in the future in case somebody takes interest in representing the social viruses as well. You can do that yourself, social virus. It's a beautiful this thing. Right, in case it's possible, why can't you make a documentary? So
yes, sir. Sir, I'm actually working right now on a particular title, that is, I'm understanding the transformation that's coming in the language, sir, due to this pandemic. Because just this, Swasti ma'am knows about it, that I was working how when we consider India and when we consider India as a national community, we have this nationalist. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Go on.
Sir, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
So I was saying, so understand, yeah, so like during the pandemic, so when we say that, yeah, the entire India came under one slogan, that is stay home, stay safe, how there were differences, because the migrant workers, they did not make a headlines until it was an extreme case that we see in the country. Then we had the cases of domestic abuses, which I did not see in any of the live headlines about pandemic. And then we had complete transformation of language and usage of certain terminologies which were completely unrelated to pandemic, but were targeted towards communities. And that gave rise to like some new kind of slurs itself, some new kinds of slangs itself, to very much targeted to those communities. And right now I'm working on that kind of a topic, that how this has become a new virus in our language itself, because of the pandemic and the panic it has caused and the chaos that's there everywhere.
Yeah, one small suggestion for you.
Hello?
You use the term national community.
Hello?
You used
Hello?
one term called national community. You remember?
Hello?
Hello? Am I audible, Suhasini?
Yes, sir. You are audible. I'll just send a message to you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. National community is what you actually called the people of India.
Okay.
So how do you want to understand national community? You want to define national community in the sense of homogenized community through the perspective of BJP? Signal illa ansute alli.
I'll just leave him a text message, sir.
Okay. ಸರ್ ಏನೋ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಹೋದ್ರು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ಶ್ರೀಧರ್ ಸರ್.
Unmute yourself. Sridhar sir, you have to unmute yourself.
So sorry, I had lost you in between due to my network issue. You were saying something, so I'm so sorry.
Okay. You mentioned a term called national community, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
It's a
sir.
very
Yes.
sensitive term because whenever there is this representation of people as a whole, it happens in terms of an ideology.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So if you really want to go ahead and do this documentary, you need to have a clear-cut idea about how you would want to call the Indians. And if you want to use this term national community, it might become slightly controversial because national community could be understood in terms of BJP terminology, homogenized community.
So my idea around national community was
We are
to
homogenized community because we don't eat beef. So instead of calling national community, you can call it an integrated community in despite diversity.
So like my idea around the entire national community, my work was how there is a trend of homogenizing this community, that everyone is safe behind, like within the four walls of the house. And my work was how you cannot homogenize it, how there is a difference within the community, and there are smaller communities which have gone unrecognized because there's a tendency that yes, it's a homogenized national community.
Perfect. Perfect.
Ma'am, I have another question, if I may.
Please, please.
Like it's to you, ma'am, actually.
What did I ever do to you? Okay.
Ma'am, during the pandemic, ma'am, there has been a lot of talking around cows and the beliefs around cows, and how this entire fact that people say that corona emerged because of bats, how bats have become like they have come under threat, ma'am. So ma'am, do you think that in the course of time, as we move to future, there will be a record where animals will be pitched against each other due to, again, like due to human reasons?
They have already been pitched like that.
Mm-hmm.
First thing during any pandemic or endemic epidemic is that the closer we go into the animals territory, we are more or less trespassing into their space, and we are bound to contract the kind of viruses or whatever bacteria that they have. And we have also spread out our cuisines. Everything on our plate, the flying, the sitting, the walking, the jumping, whatever it is, we want
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
So we never really, we don't know where to draw a line. But if you go back into the history and you try to analyze, why did Wuhan, the marketplace, in the first place, start selling all these different animals, apart from the traditional chicken or pork or any of them? Why did they get into selling snakes, water snakes, and so on and so on? Again, you begin to investigate how somewhere or the other hierarchies meddled. The people who live their life in the margins. Now it becomes very difficult, it becomes very problematic for us to somewhere or the other try to give a voice to one particular sector.
Yes.
Voices from the margin, they say we need to live. And the only way I can do is because they are not allowing me to sell chicken, and I am not getting that access to selling chicken, I am going to perhaps go get a frog, go get a snake, and I'm going to sell. These are, I mean, it becomes a little complex when you try to understand these intricate relationships. And yes, animals are already pitched against the human idea.
It's almost like the fight between people who would want to see development in the country and people who would want to save environment.
Yeah.
So So if you want to have development happening in the country, you need to construct roads, you need to construct railways, you need to construct metro rail, and all these things would cost us hell a lot of environment. So it's going to be the fight between the people who are quite progressive thinkers in terms of development and people who are environmentalists. So this kind of an irony will always be prevalent forever. So if you want to be an animal lover, you can be an animal lover in two ways: by protecting them or by eating them. So this fight is always there.
Yes, sir.
And you have posed good questions, Survadev.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sridhar sir had something to say.
Mm.
Okay.
Shall we disperse?
Yes, is that all?
I have one thing to ask.
Yes, please, Manoj, go ahead.
See, like earlier in Sir's lecture, he did mention about earlier there was more about religion in the literature you talk about, or literature and religion that way. If we go back to Oedipus Rex and we see the opening itself, they talk about the like drought or famine. Okay.
Yeah.
And there the reason comes again about the religion. You go back to God and all such things, and we see such things are very, very common in India. If there is anything, even Corona, as per I know what people talk about Corona is like, they think because there is lot of sins we have done, that's why it has come. Okay. Or maybe that there are sometimes I also think like this eco word, you talk about eco, that word has same root if you look into. So we are hit in both the ways, one economically and another one is because of the nature when you look into. So can we look into this way, that is it like eco pandemic something? Like we are out of natural resources also, or we are ruining natural resources rampantly. And another one thing, because of our money greed, because the root word is same. And can we go back to the belief what people are trying to link to and talk
Absolutely.
about like
No doubt about it. Because
this?
I wrote an article very recently on Wordsworth's 250th birthday or something. I wrote this article for this Kannada daily Prajavani. I actually wrote about this outbreak of Corona by mentioning about how we have actually lost our concern for environment. Your question is absolutely correct. There's always there that the indifference of people to the environment could of course be one of the reasons for the onset of diseases. Very true. No doubt.
And one more thing, like to elaborate further on this, uh, like if you go, has in Glotfelty book also it's mentioned saying that how in the Western, how they give importance to Bible, major religion is Christianity, so they give importance, and how they look into this, the world is created according to the Bible for the human consumption. So is it that the human is going to consume it completely, or is it that an answer that we have to stop somewhere, that pandemic? That's why maybe I felt that that's why the Western countries, European and the America and all were not bothered when this virus was out. They felt like, okay, nothing can happen. And later, even now when you see, they have the voices saying that, okay, whether we should wear the mask or not. Wearing mask is like given to be like against fundamental right. They have certain questions like that.
The world is created for human life, Ashta. The world is not created for human consumption. ಈ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ ಇಸ್ ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟೆಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಕನ್ಸಂಪ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಕನ್ವೀನಿಯನ್ಸಿಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೀವಿ. ಈಗ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, when there is this public transport like railways or buses, the seats are meant for you to be seated. You can't sleep there because there's only one seat available for you, and there are two others who got to occupy the same seat, and it has to be shared among 3 people. If you go by your philosophy that the bus has got to be consumed, you cannot lie down there, right? You cannot kind of take your utensils and start doing some cooking activity inside a bus, because it's public transport and it is meant for your consumption. So many things, in fact, have been deconstructed by the people for their convenience. Human life is what the world is meant for, not human consumption.
Ma'am, I have one question for Manoj sir, if I may.
Go ahead, just ask.
Sir, I wanted to ask you this, that how do you think that the future, because you have your expertise in children's literature, so how do you think this entire situation of pandemic is going to affect the upcoming children's literature of future? Because we still have a plethora of literature coming out of that sphere. So what do you think it's gonna have an effect on in that sphere?
I really think that, you know, like it's going to make bring more awareness among the writers to bring all these issues in their writing. Because recently I was reading, and when there were a lot of writers saying that they have got ample of new ideas, talking to children about how it's because of their complete dependency on technology and other things, they may have not able to realize what actually lockdown is. Okay, maybe in the European countries, they really, some of the children, they have no difference when you talk about lockdown as the Indian children are feeling here, okay, to an extent. So in those manners, maybe we can still more discover. That's what I can say for time being.
Thank you, sir.
Right, is that all?
I think we can end. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shiv sir. Thank you so much, Sridhar sir. And the rest, thank you so much.
No.
for
She wanted to
participating.
ask me something. So let's see.
Who wanted to ask what?
He wanted to ask me.
Yenilla, sir.
Remind me
Oh, I'm
about
sorry,
something
yeah.
I have not done.
Sir, is that offer still on?
Yeah. If the opening is there, because see, I got lost in many other things.
ಅದು
My
ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು sir.
notes are still half pending. So if you
Okay.
still have time and maybe
ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನು
another,
ಕಾಯ್ತೀನಿ ನಿಮಗೆ.
huh?
ನಾನು ಕಾಯ್ತೀನಿ, ನೀವು ಕೊಡಿ ನನಗೆ, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ.
Okay, ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ.
Yes sir.
Okay, sure. I'll send you.
Okay, the untold transactions are
Yeah,
secret.
it's a secret transaction.
Yeah, it's
It
fine.
will be made public later.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It was
Thank
a
you.
nice
See you.
session, Shiv. Good. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shiv sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Bye.